I'm Raymond Saner. I teach at Basel University, which is the oldest university in Switzerland, and at Sciences Po in Paris. And I live in Geneva, where I was one of the founders of an organization called Center for Socio-Eco-Nomic Development. That's a think tank which is ECOSOC accredited and has consultative status with the United Nations. The SDGs, as you know, are what some people call an ambitious undertaking. Ambitious in the sense that it's complex, it's over 15 years, 13 are now left of these 15 years, and it is in that sense, of course, also going to be costly. So some figures which have been mentioned, $4 trillion just per year, it's staggering. So the question is where to find this money to finance the SDGs. Hence, there's SDG 17. 17 is supposed to give suggestions and targets how countries can finance their SDGs. Now, there are different ways to finance projects such as the SDGs. In some countries, such as Scandinavian countries, taxes are high, about 40% of revenue, but the government has an understanding that what they then undertake, such as building roads, hospitals, education, whatever, will be done through government money that comes from collecting taxes from individuals or from business. And it works quite well, and even if the government changes from a party to the left to the party to the right, they haven't reduced taxes dramatically. That's the understanding within Scandinavia, because people trust that the government will actually produce what the government has promised. Now, there are other countries, some are part of the so-called neoliberal or Washington consensus solution, where the understanding is the taxes should be as low as possible on business and of individuals, so somehow that money or capital would create jobs or would create enterprises. It hasn't quite worked that way, but still, if such tax system is in place, the government can't just from one day to the other increase taxes from, let's say, 5 or 10% to 40%. It's an example from Scandinavia. So the countries are stuck with low revenue generation. And on top of it, oftentimes, they cannot collect the taxes. Somehow tax collection doesn't work for various reasons. They don't have the money to do what they're supposed to now embark on, which is to implement the SDGs. Hence, the question comes, where to find alternative sources of money, of financing. There are traditional forms of financing. You can, as I said already, ask the government to do all of it. That means 100% of the risk goes to the government and there's no risk to the private sector. Then you could have public procurement. This is a standard approach to put out a call for tender, and the company that has won the tender then implements whatever needs to be implemented. There the risk shifts from 30 government to 70%, from 70 government to 30% of the company. Then you have a 50-50, which is the public procurement solution. The public-private partnerships. But you also have concessional solutions where the risk is reduced to about 30% for the government. The company which does then implement the project has a higher risk. Or some governments could decide just to privatize what they have, sell it, make money, and then finance other projects with it. There are all plus and minuses about these different solutions, but to come back to the SDGs, what is crucial is 17.17. 17.17 spells out the following. It says, partnerships for the goals could be done, or better, are encouraged to countries up to promote effective public, public-private, and civil society partnerships. So it is an enlargement of scope. It's not just banks and governments and construction companies as an example. It is now also suggesting civil society organizations, for instance, cooperatives or other form of organizations could engage in partnerships with the government and with private sector. And that's happening. In some countries you have these mixed, so-called mixed or hybrid forms of financing. All of this should be put into the context of what are the obligations for the government. The companies in general know what is best for them. Governments oftentimes are not even aware that there are 9 different forms of public-private partnerships. Build and transfer, build, transfer, operate, and so on. These kinds of PPPs mean different things, and the legal obligation, governments should definitely know what to choose and what this means, which one of these the 9 forms of public-private partnerships. Hence, there's a need to inform, and in general, an SDG most of the time is not just one SDG, it's not just health. It is oftentimes health has an impact on employment, because if people are sick, they can't work. So these interactions, also called interdependencies, are important when a country designs its first 4-year SDG program to look for the best possible multipliers, to invest money, and most of the countries have limited amount of money, but to put it into those goals where the effect, or let's say the benefit, is multiplied. Now, while this is being possible, most of the SDGs will be cross-sectorial. That is, as I just mentioned before, it's not just health, it's health and employment, and maybe other SDGs who are part of one program or strategy. Hence, this means that different line ministries, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Employment, maybe Ministry of Transportation, they all need to cooperate with each other, otherwise these SDGs cannot be implemented. Hence, all the people in these different ministries, when they embark on implementing the SDGs, they should know, if they want to finance what they do through private-public partnerships, they should know what are these 9 different kinds of PPPs. What are the benefits? What are the obligations? And that information in general doesn't exist. On the private sector, people know. They have lawyers, they have done projects, they know the risk that it entails, but on the government side, oftentimes they're behind. And if they're behind, it could lead to unfortunate wastefulness, which a lot of the Caribbean countries, I heard, are already quite highly indebted. And if, again, another big project turns out to be not what was hoped for, that project has to be paid back. So the debt would increase, and there is a clear goal 17.14, which says countries should do their best to avoid further indebtedness. So there is, in other words, an obligation for the government to think through the financing. What kind, if public-private partnership and not some of the other forms of financing that I mentioned before, if it's PPP, what kind of PPP, by whom and how, and what will be the next generation have to pay back to finance because of these PPPs. So the next thing I would suggest, you're talking about the region. There are things that the region as such, the countries together, could do. And a lot in business, important is size, scale. So one could imagine that for all the Caribbean countries, it would be useful to go into alternative energy, clean, green energy. To buy solar panels, if all the countries together place an order, the price will come down, and it will, in that sense, be useful to have a joint procurement, a joint purchasing of solar panels, as an example. There could be other things where the countries could together work together from the services point of view, tourism, how to deal with the waste of mass tourism, incineration. It doesn't make sense if each country does it by itself. Size, again, would be important, even when it comes to the possibility, as Professor Sachs mentioned, that the future for the Caribbean could be in services. In Europe and in Asia, there's a so-called aging factor. In other words, a lot of people become older, and with age comes the need for care. And some of the European countries, the insurance companies, have accepted that their citizens can go abroad if they need care, or just if they want to have retirement in another country where the living costs will be much lower. Now, that could be something in terms of job creation and revenue creation, but then to avoid that each little Caribbean country fights or competes with each other, maybe the countries could agree which one of the islands specializes on what form of hospital care or aging care. These are possibilities where financing could make sense if the countries could come together and find solutions. And our last point, I'd say, when it comes to the SDGs, there's an understanding the goals are done. 17, not more, cannot add more. We have targets, the targets have been worked on, they're finished, they're done. The only area where the countries still have the possibilities to further develop are the indicators. The indicators are very important because that's the basis for measuring, that's the analytics, the metrics, whether a country, after 4 years into the SDGs, whether it has reached the goals it has said it wants to reach. And here, the spirit of the SDGs says, the SDGs should be inclusive, transparent, and participatory. That is, it shouldn't be experts who decide on behalf of the whole country, and the best would be if the public would be informed, involved. If they're informed and involved, they might be motivated and will be more willing to make an effort to make it possible that the SDGs will be successfully implemented. The other thing is where CARICOM has been quite successful. It was in trade negotiations. So, countries meet, and they meet regularly, and the different regional groups try to form alliances to have an impact on the other countries. So CARICOM could also stay involved with the SEEDS group. SEEDS are the small island developing countries to, for instance, put pressure on the industrialized countries because of climate change, to find a way not just to sort of blackmail them or make them guilty, which in a way they should be made guilty because they produce to some extent the climate change, but to have an impact through negotiations, not through just requesting help. It's the need is to be crafty, to form alliances, and then to get the other countries through negotiations to cooperate and to agree to a better deal for the Caribbean maybe and the other SEEDS countries.